Today on Locked On Magic, can you say offseason rumors who some people think the Orlando Magic may chase this offseason? Plus, we're going to go over two guards who might put a wrench in those plans. We'll get to all of it today on Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is June 7th, 2023. My name is Philip Rossreich. I'm the expert insight editor over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we got some fresh offseason rumors, some talk about what the Magic might do this offseason or what people are expecting them to do because the Magic don't leak anything. We'll get into some of the stuff discussed there, plus how the Magic kind of control their own destiny this offseason. Plus, we're going to try and wrap up some player reviews. We'll talk about Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs and how they evolved this season. We'll get to all that coming up here in just a moment. But first, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, this great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for. The Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So, I wanted to spend today kind of wrapping up player evaluations. I've been a little bit behind on those, and we got to talk about Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs because they are two really critical players for this team's future, and we should look back at their season and kind of figure out what to make of it. But we did get some news, and it is something that Magic fans everywhere are kind of talking about because there's just so little reported about the Orlando Magic. Jeff Weltman and his staff, for better or for worse, mostly for the better, but for the worse for us, do not leak anything. There are no draft availabilities. There is no sense, at least publicly, of what this Magic team's going to do. And credit to agents, credit to a lot of people, they tend to also keep the Magic secrets. However it is the NBA, things do get out, and speculation is the business of the game. And undoubtedly, and certainly we've talked a little bit about it yesterday, we talked about the big man need. Undoubtedly, the Magic are a team that has a lot of power this offseason. This is probably going to deserve its own podcast. I may dive into it a little bit more tomorrow. This is a team that holds a lot of cards. 2 first-round picks, 2 first-round lottery picks, the potential of this young core, perhaps a desire to add one more star player, a lot of movable contracts, cap room. It's a Magic team that can do a lot. And so right now, everyone's speculating about what the Magic are going to ultimately do. And we've talked a lot about the draft. The one thing we really haven't talked about yet is how the draft plays into free agency. If the Magic are going to go after some of the guys that we're talking about in this segment, some players that they might draft no longer make a ton of sense. And so a lot of the questions that I have is, so much of this stuff is played out. Everyone knows what's happening before free agency starts. Let's not pretend that this doesn't happen. I don't think it's tampering. I think it's like pre-negotiation. It's fine. It's benign. It's not like they're going after players who are under contract. Basketball front offices are mini intelligence agencies. If they don't know exactly how free agency is going to go or what they actually have a chance of doing before July 1st or June 30th or whenever free agency starts, if front offices don't know what's going to happen beforehand, they aren't doing their jobs. That's the truth. So the fact that there's a speculation, there's a little bit of smoke there. Is there a fire? It could just be a little sparkler. So having said that, Sean Devaney of Heavy.com spoke to a few executives around the league, and the general consensus is everyone knows the Magic are at a really, really important point. The next 2 years is going to determine who the Magic become. It's not necessarily about draft picks. It's how they manage this cap space that they have this year. It's going to really determine what the Magic are able to do. They're functioning this year at around $23 to $25 million of cap space. That's enough to sign a quality player. We talked about Naz Reid. You could easily see Naz Reid making $15 million. The Magic could sign him and add another player. That's the kind of cap room we're talking about. However, there's a lot of non-guaranteed contracts there. It is widely expected the Magic will keep Markelle Fultz. It is widely expected the Magic will keep Jonathan Isaac. But they could easily cut both of those guys, cut Gary Harris, and have max cap room to go after Fred VanVleet. As it stands now, it feels like, or it sounds like the general consensus or the general thought is the Magic are debating whether to cut Gary Harris, whose contract is fully non-guaranteed next year. He has a team option essentially for next season. That they may cut Gary Harris and his $13 million to free up cap space to make a big play in free agency. That play could be, that play, who knows what that play is, to be perfectly honest. And a lot of that play might depend on the two guys we're going to talk about in our next couple segments, in Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs. The reporting from Sean Devaney, and again, go to heavy.com. You can read the full article there. The reporting from Sean Devaney says that executives expect Orlando to chase after Gary Trent Jr. Now, Gary Trent Jr. from the Toronto Raptors is a guy that we've been talking about since the trade deadline. He was one of the trade deadline targets that we thought the Magic might push some chips into just to get him before free agency. We all understand he has a skill set the Magic really need. He is a solid three-point shooter. He is a volume three-point shooter. He can create a little bit for himself off the dribble. He's a decent defender. There are a lot of things to like about Gary Trent Jr. The other name that they keep mentioning was that the Magic could be a team that makes a run at restricted free agent Grant Williams. A little bit more of an interesting move because Grant Williams plays the 4, is a tough defender, an undersized defender, but a tough defender, and can hit the outside shot a little bit. I will admit I read that Grant Williams rumor and I was just like, I don't see it. Not a Magic guy, not overly long. Yes, we're going to care about wingspan. Not overly long. 3-point shots iffy. Maybe that's unfair to him. Like he's obviously had the big game 7 against Milwaukee last year, but essentially Milwaukee wanted him to make those threes. And if he did, they were happy to lose that game. That's Grant Williams right there. Essentially, so much of this debate, and again, I want to go into, I'll go in, I think we're going to go into this a little bit more tomorrow, but I wanted to address the rumor now since it's out there, Magic fans are talking about it, I don't want to ignore it. The going rumor, or the going decision for the Magic, is whether to spend their free agency money now, or whether to save it and stockpile it for next year. Look, Orlando has some decisions to make. They have Cole Anthony on a contract extension. They have a lot of things they have to weigh and consider, but they have the flexibility, it seems, to free up 2 max cap spaces next year. Even with the salary cap jumping, what it's going to jump, the Magic, with the talent that they already have, could become players for a Jaylen Brown who becomes a free agent next year. They could become players for a lot of different teams. And so it's interesting to see what Orlando's going to do. Now, we know at some point Jeff Weltman and his crew are going to put their chips into the middle. But what's been impressive about the way the Magic have run their business so far is they've been really patient. Like really patient. Like really, really patient. Almost frustratingly patient at times. But some of that is they want to see what they have. Like, honestly, I get it. I believe that patience is the rule of the day. Honestly, unless Jaylen Brown is already indicating he wants to come to Orlando, or one of these big name free agents, they're already indicating they want to come to Orlando. Again, don't pretend like they aren't doing that. Every team knows what's really going on, even if they don't say it publicly. They know where the winds are blowing. But honestly, free agency is not where you get players anymore. The Magic have Paolo, Banchero, they have Franz Wagner, and I don't think the Magic should do anything crazy to take the ball out of their hands or to drastically change their role or their spot on the team. They need to let these two guys cook and grow and develop and be who they are and be who the Magic want them to be. See where that gets them in the playoffs and then decide where to go. What matters now is having salary slots. I'm a big advocate of this. What matters now is having salary slots and the ability and the flexibility to make trades. And that's only going to become greater as the new CBA hits, as the new TV deal hits after next season. It's about flexibility. And that's one thing Jeff Weltman has done a very good job of as the Magic's GM or as the Magic's president of basketball operations is maintain flexibility. So yeah, Gary Trent Jr. very much interests me. That is a rumor that I believe. It's been something that we have heard about and talked about since before February. Would not surprise me if that's the big guy the Magic go after. I had Naz Reid on my list. I have Gary Trent Jr. on my list. Those are probably the two free agents I chase after most, to be perfectly honest. If not them, I chase after Mason Plumlee. I'm talking about guys on the fringes. I think the Magic's most important goal this offseason is to build depth. It's not to spend a lot of money. But that money's there to spend. That money is there to use. And the question still remains, how are the Magic going to use it? And that honestly is the question around the league. I have to do some diving into this a little bit more. So tomorrow, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but the free agency rumors are the Magic are going to chase after Gary Trent Jr. or Grant Williams to add to their three-point shooting, add some veteran poise, and add a little bit of depth, because depth to me is the most important thing this offseason. So many of these questions, though, are about how players develop internally. We'll talk about two players that grew a lot this year and found their roles. We'll get to Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs coming up in just a moment. But first, it's time for a quick word from our friends over at Gametime. A couple weeks ago, I went to the Tampa Bay Rays game over in St. Pete. Had a great time. I got to go over this. I begged the people I was going with, hey, let's go out of our way 45 minutes, go over the Sunshine State Skyway Bridge. Very awesome bridge. Very, very cool bridge. It was at the end of the Punisher. It's very, very cool. I don't know how they were able to film it and stop at the middle of that thing, but very, very cool architectural bridge. And I had a great time at the Rays game, and I can only thank Gametime. Well, I could thank the Rays, but and the company I was with, but I could thank Gametime for helping me out and getting me the tickets. The Gametime app was so easy to use. I could see what my seats looked like. I could see prices around the seats that I was looking for. I could compare prices as well and make sure I got the best deal. Gametime is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And their customer service was great. I actually had a question about getting my tickets. I had some issues downloading the link to my tickets. I said, hey, I don't think I've gotten my tickets yet. Can you help me out? They literally sent me 2 separate links to the tickets that I bought for me and my friend. I was clicked on them and I was like, oh, these are my tickets. And like, yep, absolutely. This is all you need. Sorry the MLB app isn't working. That's their fault, not ours. No, they didn't really say that, but they were really easy and really great customer service. The tickets were sent directly to my phone. And so I didn't have to dig through emails to find them. Download the Gametime app, snag tickets without the stress with Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Before we move on, I am excited to announce that I am starting a subtext. So if you ever wanted to text or talk directly to me, subtext is the place to go. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnMagic to learn more and sign up today. I'm going to start sending out messages here very, very soon during your free trial. So getting ready for the NBA draft is where I'm going to post some thoughts about draft picks and other rumors are going around as the Magic get ready for their offseason. Again, join subtext.com/LockedOnMagic to sign up today. I've been behind on player evaluations. I'm a big believer. You go through each player, you talk about them, you talk about what their future is. You give them a little bit of a grade because that's good. That's a good gimmick. But I'm behind on them. We've obviously moved into draft mode. We're in the finals. The season is so far in the rearview mirror. We are looking forward, but I want to take a moment just to look behind and look back one more time. Or at least I got two more times. I got two more I want to do. We're going to hit Gary Harris tomorrow. In addition to talking a little bit about free agency on tomorrow's show. But we got to talk about guys that we haven't talked about on the show a lot. We've talked a lot about Paolo because he's Paolo. We've talked a lot about Franz. We talked a little bit about the free agents. I got to talk about Cole Anthony. Cole Anthony had one of the most interesting and perhaps honestly mature seasons of any player on this young team. For 2 years, the first 2 years of his career, Cole Anthony was the starting point guard on this team. He was the unquestioned leader. He was one of the leading scorers. He was the guy that this team really turned to in a lot of ways. And all of a sudden, that changed for him. He's a scorer first by nature. So, obviously he's going to try and score a lot of points. But a lot of that changed for him this season. Markelle Fultz was back. He took over the starting point guard role. And Cole Anthony had to figure his way out off the bench. This is honestly one of the most difficult things that any player in the league has to do. And to do it on a team that drafted you, on a team that pushed you to the front, and for a team that you gave a lot of really good moments to. Like, let's not kid ourselves. Cole Anthony is like one of all of our favorite players for his personality, biggest cheerleader on the team. As well as his bravado with some of the shots that he made. I will still say this. Magic have not had a guard with the shot-making quality of Cole Anthony in a very long time. Whether that's something you want him to do all the time, that's another question. So for Cole Anthony to kind of step back and not only accept but own the sixth man role, it's such a huge thing. Anthony's numbers were down this year. 13 points per game, 3.9 assists per game, 4.8 rebounds per game. That's 3.3 fewer points, 1.8 fewer assists, 0.6 fewer rebounds per game than last year. He played 5.8 fewer minutes per game and, starting 61 fewer games than last year. A huge change. But Anthony found his role. And by the end of the season, Cole Anthony was owning his role. After the All-Star break, he averaged 14.9 points per game, 5.2 rebounds per game, and 3.6 assists per game on shooting splits of 47.1 overall, 41.8 from beyond the arc, and 91.4 from the foul line. Now, expecting Cole Anthony to put up those numbers is going to be hard. But Cole Anthony owned his sixth-man role. After Terrence Ross was in and out of the rotation all year, Cole Anthony owned his role. Yes, he will tell you and say publicly, and honestly, I want him to say this publicly, he believes he's a starter in this league. And honestly, the Magic should treat him almost like a sixth starter. Because his role for this team is to be the sixth man. And that is a role that he accepted, and that is a role he thrived in last year. Being a heater off the bench, being a better playmaker, which he was. So much of his game improved even if the numbers didn't. And if this is the player that Cole Anthony is going to be, the Magic are going to be set for a little while. Obviously, Cole Anthony does a lot of things really well, but to see his shooting take such a step up and his spot-up shooting got a lot better as he played a little bit more off the ball. His pull-up shots got a lot smarter, when to go for them, where to go for them, how to get into them. Got a lot smarter and a lot more efficient. He is a tough dude. Cole Anthony is one of the best rebounding guards that I've seen on this team. He will get after boards. He will out-leap guys for rebounds. He is a tough dude, and he is not afraid to mix it up. And that kind of attitude serves him really, really well. Cole, as I mentioned before, the biggest cheerleader of anybody on this team. I would be afraid to let Cole Anthony go because he is a glue that binds this group together. And that's so valuable. But obviously now comes the next question. Can he do this again? What is his level as a sixth man, as a producer, as a scorer? What is that kind of baseline? And how does he keep growing and developing? The Magic obviously have a little bit of a decision to make. He is extension eligible this offseason. He becomes a restricted free agent if they're not able to come to an extension after next season. And honestly, I think it is a fair question whether the Magic will extend Cole Anthony. Honestly, I think it's very much in the realm of possibility that the Magic's big free agency moves this offseason are extending Markelle Fultz and extending Cole Anthony. And again, like I said, filling that salary slot. The bottom line is this season for Cole Anthony, he had a choice. He had a choice to kind of sulk at not being the starter anymore. He had a choice to not kind of learn what didn't work from his first 2 years. He had a choice to try and just prove everyone wrong and score, but that's not who he is. Instead, he accepted his role, he cheered on his teammates, and he found his way to make a big impact, to make a winning impact. Something that I think a lot of people had questions about coming out of college. Cole Anthony isn't going to change. He is a scorer first, and you want him to be a scorer first. And the Magic found a role for him to channel that in a really positive way. But to Cole Anthony's credit too, he found a way to make that work for him as well. He didn't compromise who he was while he got better at a lot of areas of the game. And obviously, the rap on him coming out of college wasn't wholly accurate. A lot of it was just a quick look at the stats and a quick look at his play and not understanding the context and the injuries, especially that he had at North Carolina. Cole Anthony is a really solid player. And while his numbers were down last year, last season was his best season because he really found the role that makes the most of his talent. Another player who's still trying to find his way and make the most of his talent is Jalen Suggs. We'll talk a little bit about what we saw from him last year coming up in just a moment. Like Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs entered the league with a ton of expectation, a ton of potential, and a ton of weight on his shoulders. And he was a player that, like Cole Anthony, at times struggled to live up to that, or struggled to live up to it in a way that you could clearly see this is winning basketball. This is what he's going to do when the team is winning. Because ultimately, that's like the big piece of the puzzle here. Ultimately, what we're talking about, ultimately what we're thinking about is, what does this Magic team look like when they're winning? That's the ultimate question. Who are the Magic when they're winning? We ask that a lot about a lot of guys and a lot of players. And a lot of the questions that I have about some of the starters is, what are they going to look like in the playoffs? Are they going to be able to step up in the playoffs? We're not going to know what this roster really needs. And obviously we know it needs shooting and depth and all that. We're not going to know the actual type of players that they need until the playoffs expose them. A lot of these young players don't even know what they need to really improve on until the playoffs come around. And they're like, oh, I thought I was this, but to be that, I need to do X, Y, and Z. The playoffs reveal a lot. Jalen Suggs' first year is obviously a really, really difficult one. Injuries really hurt him. He struggled with a shot. He became an excellent defender and a great competitor, but he really struggled to stay on the court. And early in this season, it looked like Suggs was going to have those same struggles again. The shot just wasn't quite coming around. Injuries, ankle injuries early in the season really slowed him down. And so Jalen Suggs you look at his numbers and it's just not impressive. 9.9 points per game, 2.9 assists per game, 3 rebounds per game. This isn't the star the Magic thought they were drafting. And yes, his defense is still fantastic, but there's still a lot to talk about. There's still a lot left on the table. But, something funny did happen. As Suggs got more consistent playing time, as he got past the ankle injuries from early in the season, we started to see his offense come around. We started to see his offense really begin to build. Yes, his three-point shooting was only 32.7%, a huge increase off 21.4%. But in his 19 games after the All-Star break, he hit 36% of his three-pointers. A nice little bit of optimism. But Suggs kind of started to really make a positive impact. Where we all recognize Gary Harris, great three-point shooter, good defender. The Magic starters are actually better with Suggs on the floor. With Harris on the floor, the Magic starters had a plus 1.4 net rating in 570 minutes. With Suggs on the floor, it was plus 11.3, although just in 58 minutes, with a 102.4 defensive rating. Suggs is still finding himself on the floor and still finding his comfort. And this offseason, last offseason, he had ankle surgery. This offseason, having a full offseason to work on his game. This is a make or break offseason for Jalen Suggs. If Jalen Suggs comes back to camp in October, the three-point shot is consistent, he can stay on the floor consistently, that's your starter at shooting guard. Honestly, what the Magic might do with Gary Harris might depend on how far the Magic think Jalen Suggs is already. And look, Jalen Suggs went back home to Minneapolis, so he's not in the Advent Health Training Center where the Magic can kind of keep an eye on him, keep a close eye on him. But everyone, again, these guys the basketball front offices are mini intelligence agencies. Suggs still has this tremendous potential. All those scouts, they're not wrong. Scouting is guessing. It's a spectrum. It's a range. It's saying, well, if this guy hits, he could be this. But, the question is always then, what if he doesn't hit? What if he doesn't reach his full potential? Suggs, though, has an NBA skill. He is an excellent defender, an extremely disruptive defender. He gets deflections, he gets steals, and yes, he still makes young player mistakes where he goes for those steals a little bit too much. But when he gets down defensively, he is as tough to beat as anyone, especially considering his size, which would seemingly put him at a detriment, but somehow he turns into an advantage. And that defense is what's keeping Suggs on the floor and certainly keeping the Magic very invested in Suggs. As he continues to improve, as his explosiveness, as his understanding of the game improved throughout the year, he got better finishing at the rim, an area where he still needs to really get better. He got better taking threes and knowing which threes to take and when to take his jumper and when to attack and when to do all these things. He went through all the usual growing pains of young guards. But at the end of the day, for Suggs, it's going to come down to a shot. Because the Magic need him essentially to be a 3-and-D player, unless he can become that star that we all thought he could on draft night, which is certainly still possible. Like, don't get it wrong. He can still do that. He has the capability to hit those shots and to attack in transition, to be a really dynamic scorer and attacker. Not to mention a playmaker as well. It's all just elements of his game that have to be layered on. And again, maybe layered on more than we thought they would be on draft night. But his defense and his shooting are the keys to his success. And, I've kind of taken to saying next season is sort of a prove-it year for a lot of guys on this Magic team. This Magic group has the talent to be a playoff team. The question is, how good of a playoff team can this group be? Next season is about finding out just how good this Magic team might be. And who can step up their game and is up to stuff, and which guys don't exactly fit, or which guys aren't exactly part of that big picture. It's Markelle Fultz and Wendell Carter, proving themselves in the playoffs and saying, okay, there might be these weaknesses in this team as a playoff team. Can these two players step up? Is it really a weakness or not? We don't know. And next season's about finding out, and that's okay. It's okay to find out what young guys can do. Jalen Suggs is very much in that same group. What more can he do? What will he look like in a postseason environment? What will he look like when the team is under pressure? A lot of these young guys face these questions. But next year is a prove-it year for this young team to see what the whole picture ultimately looks like. And Jalen Suggs set himself up well for it with how he ended this season because we know he can defend and his offense started to come around and look impressive. Now we need to see what's real and what's not with Jalen Suggs. And that makes next season a huge one for the young guard, especially with the Magic potentially bringing in more guards through the draft and free agency and all that stuff coming up. I want to thank you again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find me on Twitter at @PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all of the places on the podcast to your podcast-enabled listening device. For latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can follow us there on Twitter at @OMagicDaily. We want to thank you again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. If you're part of my everyday crew on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic, I've talked a little bit about it already. We'll dive a little bit more into the Magic's free agency possibilities and strategies, plus talk about Gary Harris and where he fits into all of this, as well as dive into Game 3 of the NBA Finals. We'll get to that on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic, but until then, for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.